Texas Republican Congressman Dan Crenshaw, who is a member of the Homeland Security Committee. Congressman, before we get into the president's visit to Texas today and talk about his border strategy, I would like your reaction to the Attorney General today testifying that there was indeed spying on the Trump campaign and that he's looking into it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it should be looked into. The Attorney General obviously has some reason for believing that, and whether it was spying or whether there was good reason for that spying, I think is the question that he's trying to answer, and I think the American people deserve to know that answer. So
in addition to the IG report that we may see very soon, it looks like AG Barr on a parallel track, but also the question was brought up why the Trump campaign was never even notified that that this was actually occurring.
Yeah, you would think that that's exactly what they would do if they really cared about solving a counterintelligence investigation. I do have some history in counterintelligence. I understand what goes into these kinds of operations, and it does seem a little strange that we would not notify our fellow Americans when something like this is going on.
During the hearings, Congressman, a lot of debate over just how much, if any, of the Mueller report should be redacted. Again, with your experience in these kind of things, what's at stake if there are no redactions?
Well, it's hard to say. I have not read it. I don't know what's in it. There's definitely potentially classified material, damaging material that shouldn't be released. I still urge them to release as much as possible under the law.
I want to switch now back to the topic of immigration, particularly border security. President Trump had an impromptu press conference, if you will, at a fundraiser day after hearing some heart-wrenching stories. He wanted the public to hear them. Representative Crenshaw, we heard about people finding dead bodies on their ranches, people afraid to go to their gates, homes afraid to answer their own doors. This is your part of the country. You know well just how shocking these stories are. I don't think the American public has ever heard them before.
No, we need to get those kind of stories out. I have personally heard those stories. Because here's the reality. We have an overwhelming crisis on our border right now. Just this year, just this fiscal year alone, there's been more apprehensions than in an entire year over the last 5 years. We're at absolute crisis levels. Okay, so there's a problem and we need to fix it. And there's a real issue with the fact that we don't have partners on the other side of the aisle who even have a desire to fix it. All right, they didn't want the wall. Right. Okay, then they voted that way. Well, what about the asylum process? There's a very obvious problem occurring here. People are taking complete advantage of the asylum process. Okay, they're coming over with families because they know that if they bring a kid with them, it's basically their ticket across, and they know they'll be released into the homeland. Well, that's an unsustainable policy, and it's not fair to legal immigrants. It's not fair to cut in front of them. It's not fair to these migrants. We should be telling them that they can claim asylum in their home countries or in Mexico, so they don't have to make this dangerous journey across the border, which, by the way, is completely controlled by drug cartels. This is resulting in human trafficking. It's resulting in kids being used and recycled over and over again by different adults to cross the border. I saw 16 different kids that happened to in one day that I was down there near McAllen.
Now, Representative, also the composition. Some have argued on the other side of the aisle from the Republicans that this isn't up to some of the crisis levels of before, but certainly the composition with so many families, with so many children being used this way, has to spark some greater sense of urgency, you would think, from Washington, D.C.
Exactly. You would think there's a different problem now, and it requires different solutions. All right, we need more detention facilities there. We need more immigration judges immediately. These cases need to be adjudicated fast, and if they're not found to be valid, then they can be deported right away. But instead what's happening is that we're being overwhelmed, and then everyone's just being released. Okay, and then that's it. I mean, They really don't come back. I mean, you can put deportation orders out there, but they're very difficult to enforce. Right. This is a completely unsustainable policy. It's not how you run a country. I mean, why even have borders at all? Why do we check people when they come in on airplanes? What's the point?
Some don't want us to have borders at all.
That's exactly the problem. Yeah. That's exactly the problem. Some truly don't want that.
Congressman, I do have to ask you about your reaction. I would like to get it from a tweet from your colleague, New York Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. In it, she says that the far right loves the drum of fear and resistance to immigrants. But have you ever noticed they never talk about what's causing people to flee their homes in the first place? Perhaps that's because they'd be forced to confront one major factor fueling global migration, climate change. So again, sort of conflating illegal immigration with immigration and making this a global problem. But climate change?
Yep. Well, it's news to me. I didn't know the Green New Deal would also solve the border crisis.
Well, it's the ultimate deal. It's going to solve all of our woes in this country if we could just figure out how to pay for it. But does that, to you mean, in your mind though, does that mean they're taking this seriously, or are they looking to score political points?
Oh, it's pretty clear that they're not taking this seriously at all. I mean, listen, the numbers speak for themselves. This is not due to climate change, all right? Every immigrant who comes across has a different reason for wanting to come across, but it certainly isn't climate change. And that's just a ridiculous statement. You know, they've gotten to this point where they want to blame climate change for quite literally everything now. And sorry, but the Green New Deal is not going to solve that. Well, it will wreck our economy, so maybe immigrants won't want to come here anymore. So maybe that's what she's getting at.
We did see a downturn during the Great Recession. Before I let you go then, what could solve this? Is there something realistic in our grasp, considering the current political climate, that could at least start to address this issue?
Yes, like I said, we need to reform the way our asylum process works immediately. We have to take into account the real problem here, which is that people are taking advantage of this process. Okay, so what do? Well, we need more detention facilities immediately. Okay, we need to actually be able to house these people while their cases are adjudicated. And we need the resources to adjudicate those cases. We need more immigration judges there now, and then they can be turned around and deported if their cases are not found to be valid. They should be taking asylum cases up in Mexico. They should be allowed to wait in Mexico, as the Trump administration wanted. We should not allow activist judges to overturn that decision. By the way, there's precedent for that. President Clinton did the same thing with Haiti. Okay, this is not some crazy idea. It makes sense. It is safe there. There's no reason to think it isn't. They're not fleeing Mexico. Okay, so those are just a few solutions that we should all be able to agree upon to get back, get operational control of our own borders and have sovereignty over our own country.
Congressman Crenshaw, thank you very much. Appreciate it.